Well, Shannon, it is filter optional again.
It is, and it looks like you had a wardrobe change just because you took off your sweatshirt.
Yes, I did have a
wardrobe
wardrobe change, and this is filter optional, and I am the no filter.
Yes, and I'm the filter.
And my name is Chico West.
I'm Shannon West.
And we are a married couple.
Oh my gosh, stop.
I'm just random
yes.
today. And it's...
So we are, coming off of recording one podcast because it's supposed to... So by the time this one airs, we will know just how severe the snow, Mageddon will be next week.
I was talking to my younger
Dallas.
brother Ty this morning.
Yes.
I told you I talked to him, and his wife Jamie is from Nebraska.
Oh, right.
And we're just talking. He's my brothers are down in San Antonio, so it's not as cold. It's probably 15 degrees warmer. This morning it was 22 here, and it was like 35 in San Antonio, which is cold for San Antonio. But Jamie goes, yeah, my brother said in Nebraska it's minus 20.
I mean, that's not. Okay.
that is
okay.
like that's just not right.
I know, but it's like I said last week, they're a little more prepared than we are. I know they laugh at us, but we really, I wear flip-flops and tank tops on most days because Texas is hot.
Yes.
But
well, and just a couple weeks ago, I was playing, golf in a short sleeve shirt on Saturday. 2 weeks ago today,
right?
It was 65, 70 degrees.
Right.
It was nice.
So you all will have seen, and we will have all experienced the snow or not snow or whatever.
Well, and that's why I say that Dallas, Texas, is I'm going to use a psychology term,
yes.
or kind of a medical term. Dallas, Texas is bipolar.
Yes.
It's like it can be 50 degrees different from 1 week to the next. It's crazy.
One day, yeah.
One day.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It is bipolar, up and down, up and down. So we have extremes. It's wild. But I am excited about today's episode. But let's talk a little bit about last week's episode. We did it on solitude versus loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin brought up something. He's our producer, and although this is a West Media production, but he, as our producer, he goes, "What's the difference, Chico and Shannon?" I didn't want to get y'all on a tangent between loneliness and being alone.
Feeling alone,
Feeling alone.
Right, because you might be in a house full of people, whether that be a spouse or pets or, well, I guess people. Pets aren't human, but they're a little human. Okay, they're humans, sort of. So you can be in a house full of people, so you're not lonely. You're not lonely. You're not looking for somebody to go to dinner with or watch a movie with or whatever. You're not lonely, but you're like alone in your thoughts. Like you just have all these thoughts and you're just feeling so alone.
And not to sound sexist, but I think this does happen more with men because we're just not as good about
processing.
Sharing and processing, yeah.
Yes. Females like to process. They like to call friends and they're like, okay, help me process this
And
situation.
they can talk for a freaking hour.
Well, they just like to break
nothing.
stuff down. You just break it down and you talk about and the what ifs, and especially if you have a lot of friends that are Enneagram 6s, they have so many questions that you just process the whole thing
and
out.
you go down tangent after
you
tangent.
Every scenario, every safety precaution, every scenario, you break it down. So with men, though, I think they're just kind of stuck with their thoughts thinking, am I alone in thinking this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're
yes.
used to...
But here's the deal.
Then,
I think COVID, since last March, we're coming up on a freaking year of this crap. And, we had lockdowns starting on March 17th or around our whole country. People didn't go out. You couldn't get haircuts. Everything shut down. Only take out food. And so all of a sudden, man, you are alone. You're alone with your thoughts. You're alone. People aren't
With your
really
fears.
Your fears. Your
Your
You can't even
anxieties,
go.
your stressors.
Oh man, the gym shut down.
Exactly.
Everything shut down, and so it really exploded that instead of taking that time for that quiet reflection.
And I would feel lonely and alone. Well, I would feel alone in my thoughts because I also, certain thoughts I would have would feel so selfish to have because,
Yes, definitely.
people were losing their jobs. They were losing their homes. They were,
Some people were, losing loved
dying.
ones
They
from
were- yes,
from COVID.
I mean,
Yes.
it was so, it seemed so
And
much
they couldn't even
worse.
see them and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's like, man,
So I would
very
feel
powerless
yes.
feeling.
And so alone in your thoughts because you're thinking, well, I can't really complain about that.
Exactly, makes you feel
because,
like selfish and guilty
right.
for even having those feelings.
Yes.
When
Yeah.
people have way more serious shit going on.
Exactly.
And so I like that question Kevin posed. So down the road we'll come back and we'll expound on it.
Yeah.
But I really want to get into what I think kind of plays into what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
I've done a few talks on this. It's called, what are our core wounds?
Core wounds.
You know-
WOUNDS.
And
Wounds.
everybody has core wounds, and there's two basic core wounds.
Right. You can break it down to the two basic core wounds.
And from those stem, a lot of other ones.
So picture, if you're a visual person, just picture two, lines on the left side of a piece of paper. And one line represents one core wound and the other line represents another core wound. Okay, so you have your two core wounds on the left side of your paper, okay?
Okay.
And so what are the core wounds, Chico?
The core wounds are inadequacy and abandonment.
Abandonment and inadequacy, okay?
And from that is like when we have those core wounds, and those happen to every one of us. And
Yes.
if you go back to some episodes that we've done in the past, and especially the ones after Shannon came back from on site and stuff like that, it's it's not blaming our parents, although some parents need blame,
Well,
but it's really about naming.
Well, and you have to really look at, so for Chico in particular, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about abandonment because I think one of your core if we all ascribe to the fact that we have those two core wounds, abandonment and inadequacy, I'd like for you to give our audience an example of abandonment in your life, and then I can give some of it inadequacy too. But
But real quick, everyone
Yes.
has those same two core wounds?
Yes.
I mean,
they do. That's
yes.
Well,
And-
yes.
From that, and how we respond to those core wounds and how we heal our own core wounds, we'll expound on that a
Yeah,
little
but
more.
let's give examples of the core
First.
wounds so that people can, like, if Kevin's sitting there thinking, wait, I don't think I have abandonment or inadequacy, let's give some examples so that we can.
Yeah,
Would
and
you
so
like to start?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll start. Mine's easy. I mean, it
It
makes
is easy.
sense, and
Yes.
people will go, "Oh, no joke."
Right.
But one of my biggest core wounds is abandonment. I was 10 years old. May 8th, 1979,
Yep.
finishing up 4th grade. My dad, biological dad, tragically died in a car automobile kind of accident.
Yes. Vehicle accident. Yes.
Vehicle accident. And he was 31 years old. He was a young man.
Yes.
younger than me.
Yes.
Yep.
And so he had 3 boys, and the three of us, me being the oldest, there was a big time abandonment issues.
Yes.
I show up back at school a few days later. Everybody else had dads.
You probably felt abandoned by God too. It's
Oh.
like you feel abandoned by God. You feel abandoned by your dad, obviously,
Yes.
even though he had no control over that.
No, but also
And then-
I was angry. I
Yes,
had
yes.
and how I was healing that is I had projection, but everybody was lifting him up because he was 31 years old. Oh, this martyr. He was the oldest of 6 boys.
But then your grandfather was telling you needed to be the head of the household now. You were 10 years old.
That I need to be the man.
Man of the house, yeah.
Yes. And
What
so
did I say?
you said head of the house.
Oh, well, the
Yes.
man of the house, yeah.
And so and I remember that. I don't remember
Yeah.
my mom standing right next to me when he said that.
Right.
My dad's dad saying that. I believe her.
Right.
But right there was this abandonment issue of, man, I need to be the man. But but I'm a little boy.
But I've been abandoned by everyone. I mean, everyone
Yes.
is, I mean, you know.
And so it's like, and people overcompensated for that abandonment. My uncles were great and they
Right.
loved me well and stuff like that. But I was angry. And so how I was healing that abandonment goes into how we heal our own core wounds.
Yeah.
Is either through projection, where you're pissed at effing everybody.
Well, let's get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so Chico obviously has an extreme example of abandonment, and it can be experienced through divorce or loss of any sort. But it also can be. I experienced abandonment. I felt like with friend groups. Girls are mean, and over the time of my growing up, I switched from friend group to friend group, and there were times when I felt abandoned by friend groups. And so how do you cope? We're going to be talking about how you cope with those core wounds, but then inadequacy was probably my go-to as far as I spent 9 years at a camp that I didn't get invited back to for my last year. Talk about inadequacy. I was 15 years old and I did not understand why I was not invited back to camp. I mean, I got waitlisted, but I didn't get back in. But I had crazy feelings of inadequacy around things like that because I wanted to be the perfect daughter. I didn't want, anyway. So that, I think we can all relate to feelings of inadequacy at certain times in our life. I mean,
yes, and me, I've had a lot of
inadequacy is easier to identify.
yes, it's easier to identify. But yes.
And so those are the core wounds of abandonment or inadequacy. I have a lot of inadequacy, and stuff like that. Is like I always wanted to be taller. I mean, I'm 5'7".
Right.
Well,
I think we all want.
Yes,
different things
there's inadequacy there. As boys, but then you get older and the inadequacy comes up in different ways. It's like all of a sudden your friends, if they're making more money than you, it's like I'm inadequate.
Right.
And so those core wounds get pulled back up throughout your lifetime.
Okay, so now that we've kind of given it, does that make a little more sense, Kevin, about the two
Definitely
core wounds? Okay, so you have abandonment and inadequacy, and out of those comes
I don't know if I would say out of those how we heal those.
Or
cope or
try
heal.
to heal. We try to heal those wounds.
Yes.
Inadequacy by several different things. So let's talk about those.
Yeah, and so
how do you try to heal?
So a lot of times, if we have abandonment or inadequacy or both,
right?
What we do is we will heal them through projection. Where we're projecting on others. Like I hate you. Come
like
up
anger,
anger.
It's outward. It's all outside of your body.
Outside of your body, and you'll
putting fists through walls, putting holes in walls, and it's just all outward.
It's getting in fights and stuff like that. I had all that growing up, man. I was a fighter. And it's like I got pissed. And so a lot of times I can remember now growing up, fighting my best friends at the time in my life, because my inadequacy came up.
Right.
And all of a sudden I wasn't smart enough or didn't know this word or whatever the situation was. Is like, man, a lot of my inadequacy had to do.
Like for you, like spelling is your nemesis. You can't spell or whatever. For me, it was math. When I went off to college and they did it, did a little assessment. Do they still do that? You take a little math assessment to see which math class you fit into?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I took the little assessment, and then they came back to me and they said, okay,
you need to take a non-credit.
No,
math.
no. I got credit for it, but then you know how you sign up for English 101 in college, everything starts with a 1 your freshman year, and the first class that you take it's 101 or 102, and they were like, you need to take 005, and I was like, wait, what's 005? And so when I went to register, I looked at the schedule and it said 005 remedial math. And I was like, you
inadequacy,
are
big
kidding
time.
me. Oh my gosh.
Right there.
I've never thought I could do math until I was your business manager in QuickBooks. Like accounting is not really math. It's not algebra. So I never thought I could do math until an adult.
I felt inadequate just doing that assessment test thing.
Yeah,
Like, I don't even,
totally.
this is just a waste of time. Like,
Okay,
I can
so
tell
do you
y'all I
see-
need to start at the very beginning.
Do you
Yes,
see how
yes.
that's core wounds? And so
Yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah,
all of a
just
sudden, it's like for
these
me
feelings,
as a kid, a lot of the way I would heal those core wounds was through projection. You know,
Right.
I hate you. But then there's this other side of on how we heal ourselves is through introjection.
Which is what I did.
What is turn it inward? You know, and
Just
so
feel
me
down,
it
tell
was I
myself
hate
I'm-
you.
Yep, that's what I would
and
do
then
too.
introjection is I hate me.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so those are the two ways a lot of times we
Right.
begin to
Why
heal
can't I be
ourselves.
better at this? Why can't I do this? Why is this so hard for me? And why do I need it?
Yeah.
By the way.
And so a lot of times it's like we do that, but then when those things aren't working, we go into, you know, codependency or addiction. And so for me, it's like it's classic because I went into addiction, you went into codependency.
Completely.
You know, and so if I can't fix you, then, you know, I'm going to fix me by numbing it out.
And if
you
I
went
can't
in,
fix me, I'm going to fix you. So because of the introspection, I went to codependency and
and so it happens like clockwork.
right.
And the more I unpack this, you know, this model, I see it in others. I mean, the deal is I see it in my mom big time. I mean, she has all this abandonment and inadequacy, and I see it coming out with introspection and projection, you know, and then her codependency is off the charts.
Right.
You know, and so it's like she's never walked through the pain box.
Well, okay, so wait. You're jumping ahead a little bit.
I did jump ahead.
Okay, so we have inadequacy and abandonment. Okay, core wounds. And you can see how kind of in your life, physically, whether it's medical trauma or physical trauma or emotional trauma, how all that could fit into an abandonment or an inadequacy wound. Okay, so
Yes.
then you're trying to put Band-Aid. You know how you saline clean out wounds. You know, you're trying to clean out the wound. So you go to projection or introjection, and you're just trying to clean that out. And then when that's not working for you, you kind of you might go to addiction or codependency.
And see,
so,
but here's the deal: is let's pause on addiction. Addiction doesn't necessarily mean just chemical addiction.
No,
you know,
for sure, it can be
with alcohol,
eating
drugs. It
disorder,
can be eating. It can be
either
shopping.
way,
It can be
shopping,
work.
gambling.
Yeah, gambling, process addictions.
Uh-huh.
You know, and so addiction. It can be. I believe.
Some medicator.
You know, I believe I've seen people get addicted to religiosity, especially here in the Dallas area. It's
Yeah.
like they get, you know, they'll go to this Bible study. They're volunteering at the church. They're
Yeah.
doing all this stuff. They're reading their Bible all the time. But it isn't being internalized.
Right.
You know,
So-
and so
you
we
have-
see it a lot.
Right. So you have those things.
Very
and so
performance driven.
when
Does that make sense?
Yes, very performance driven. And so when people kind of get to the end of themselves, whatever their rock bottom is, I got to a rock bottom with codependency. You can get to a rock bottom with any sort of addiction or substance abuse or anything like that. Then
But here's the deal, Shannon.
What's the go-to though? What's the go-to when you hit that point? What's the go-to treatment?
A lot of times people get into treatment, but you
Some
don't even
don't.
need treatment because we all have these core wounds. A lot of people go to treatment primarily for addiction, sometimes for codependency.
I know. I'm just trying to put this.
You're
visual.
trying to put the visual, but you're not quite there because we all have it. But all of us get into recovery somehow,
Okay.
some way.
Okay, let me go ahead and paint this picture just real quick again. Okay.
Okay,
so
but I'm not sure you're painting it correctly.
I know.
Okay.
Well, you can stop me. So we have the sheet of paper. We have the abandonment and inadequacy, the core wounds on the left side of the paper, and then you add the projection or the introjection and the codependency and the addiction or substance abuse or all those other things. So we kind of have that all kind of going on in the middle, and then we have a pain box.
No,
Okay,
we don't.
why?
Okay. You're not correct. A lot of times what we do is
I don't need to be told I'm not correct. You can just correct me, but that's how you painted it before. So
That's
what?
how I painted it before, but
Okay,
most
so-
of us avoid the paint box.
I
So
know,
you don't
so that's
put
what
the
I'm-
paint box there. You know, what you
Well,
do
you
is a
said
lot of people.
The way you illustrated it, which was awesome, was that the paint box is there,
the paint.
but we go around it, under it, over it.
Okay, you're correct.
Okay, so
Yes.
let me go back. The visual, okay? Inadequacy, abandonment on the left side, then projection, introjection, codependency, addiction, then the pain box. But most tend to go around that pain box, under the pain box, over the pain box. They don't go through the pain box.
Yes, they don't. And
They
so what?
might go around it to
Recovery.
treatment,
Or
counseling.
no, but a lot of people in treatment, you know, begin to unpack that stuff, the introjection, projection.
Yeah.
And they get into recovery and they're doing a lot of good things. They're going to meetings.
But they're still going around the pain box.
They're going
Do you
around
not
the pain
see-
box.
Are you not
yes.
tracking with me?
No, I'm tracking. I'm
Okay.
just giving you a different illustration in the
Okay.
sense of, you know, a lot of people went, you know, like you went through that when you went to on-site, you began to unpack the projection and the
Yes.
introjection.
So how do you
and
go
the code.
through the pain box?
And so a lot of people though avoid the pain box.
Yes.
And so what they do, they get into recovery and they do a lot of good checklist stuff and they have a sponsor, you know, they start doing yoga. There's other things we do to get into recovery to get, you know, there's a lot of self-help books and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And we don't break down the pain box. The pain box is that hard place. What we call that pain box is really doing the work. And the work is, you know, breaking down, you know, those old messages, the narratives that we've been telling ourselves, you know, and what we do a lot of times, I mean, I believe, and I'm a firm believer in it, is different types of therapy. And we've talked about some of it, you know, in past episodes. We've talked about like psychodrama and stuff like that. It's like, you know, beginning to unpack and see what, you know, naming what was blocking you from really experiencing a fruitful life.
Right.
It-
And it's tough. It's tough to even know where to begin with all that. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And without some guidance, but you know, some inner child work, you know, which I always thought was like,
Yahoo shit.
well, yeah, I mean, like what really? Like how am I going to connect with my 10-year-old self or whatever? But there are modalities to help you connect with those core wounds to help you kind of revisit them.
And revisit them, but not just revisit them, rewire them.
Right. And
know-
now they're doing this brain spotting and all this stuff that's like science, like it's serious reworking of the brain. They know so much more about brain health. I mean, you know, even down to the concussions and, you know, all that kind of stuff. The study of the brain has just exploded. It's just incredible what they can do to help rewire some of that stuff. And what comes with that, when you can figure out how to do the work and go through the pain box, there's so much freedom on the other side. It's like, it might be a little painful because it's a pain box.
It
But
might be. It is.
It is. It's painful. I was
But
just
it-
trying
but-
to soften
but-
it a little bit.
But don't soften it because I love the
but-
gift of pain. The gift
Yes.
of pain is healing.
Right.
And so if I'm willing to walk through that pain box, you know, and really be there for a little bit to unpack that stuff, to unpack those old messages that 10-year-old Chico was
Right.
telling himself about his abandonment, and then that abandonment, his dad's gone, and so all of a sudden that little 10-year-old boy is also, he's inadequate. He's not like the other kids.
Well, and what
the
they can walk you
messages-
through is to say to you, what they taught me at onsite was to, like, what would I say to my 10-year-old self if I'm hearing this tape that you play for yourself? Like, I'm a 10-year-old little boy. I've lost my dad. It's my fault or something like that, or whatever you're telling yourself. How, you know, what encouraging you to say, what would you say to that 10-year-old? You'd say, of course you didn't do that. Of course you weren't responsible for that. Of course you weren't. There's a lot of healing and
in that. But if you take it even a step further, Shannon, you're right on the right track. I like that because sometimes when those old core wounds come up, you know, in the past without me doing the work, I would be responding as today I'm a 52-year-old man that's married for 25 years, but I would be responding not even realizing from that 10-year-old self. I still don't want to lose that 10-year-old because
Right.
that 10-year-old is, man,
Survivor.
he's a survivor, but also he really gets me in touch with my vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it gives me the ability to connect with others in a way because of the trauma that I went through.
Scenario, now that we have kids, obviously, and when they were little, and people don't know my traumatic experience with camp because they just didn't know. I think they just thought I didn't go back or whatever it was when I was 15. So they think I'm a lifer, and so when they would say, "Oh, so are your boys going to camp?" And I was like, I would lead with my 10-year-old, my 15-year-old self and be like, no,
Not to that camp.
not to that camp. Like, that's not happening. And then and then people are like, "Oh, why?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding? Do you know what they did?" I would still talk about it. And now it's to a point to where I'm like, that wasn't my fault. I don't know what went haywire with that situation, but
But the message is that inadequacy.
I didn't do anything wrong.
But that inadequacy, and so some of it for you wasn't just introjection, it was projection right there. You projected, your hurt and your
Yes.
pain from what the camp did to you,
Yeah.
that you don't even know what it is.
Right.
No way I'm not going to do that. And
Yeah.
so that's, that 15-year-old little girl that was rejected and stuff like that. It's like we deny that because like what we talked about earlier, in this episode about, well, why should I be alone? There's people that are, losing loved ones that didn't even get to say goodbye and stuff like that. Is like all that inadequacy just feeds all that core, those core wounds are fed by the messages we tell ourselves. And so that's where what we do is when you see others that are projecting or interjecting or doing their codependency dance or their addiction dance, it's like, man, they haven't dealt with their core wounds.
Right.
And they haven't walked through the pain box.
And we all have them.
Yes.
We just do.
And
It's
so-
the human condition.
Oh, and it's crazy. And so like last week's episode when we talked about that place of solitude, it's like we can listen, to the questions. We can listen to what God is telling us, especially when we begin to walk through that pain box.
Yeah.
So today for me, it's like I have more compassion and grace because my mom has a lot of core wounds, a lot of inadequacy and abandonment that she's never dealt with.
Right.
And
of course, God can heal these wounds. But if we aren't honest with ourselves, God knows that. So I just encourage people that think, well, I'm just praying for healing from any core wounds that I may not recognize or anything like that. I think you can do that, and I think God can heal them. But I think God also knows our blind spots.
Well, and also what I like, Shannon, is I'm such a big believer in community. It's like I think, man, to really dig deep on these core wounds, yes, you can do it with God, but I think it helps to be around others because you don't, like our last episode, you don't feel so lonely.
Well, right.
It's like all of us have it. And it's like when you see other people doing their work, walking through their pain box, it gives us an ability to step back and go, wait a minute, I can connect with that.
Yeah.
I can connect with that place and have compassion for others.
And we have to talk about, on another episode, we need to talk about, how you do that work because we've even had our own kids, say, I don't know how to do that work. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, and doing the work is
tough.
And so being at that place where I can step into the work, I can recognize, okay, all of a sudden I do have abandonment and inadequacy, and here how it has manifested itself in my life. And the way I'm healing it is sometimes I'm healing it through projection, I hate you, to interjection, I hate me.
Yeah.
Or into that, okay, if I hate you and hate me, I'm gonna fix you then.
Yeah.
Or how do I fix myself, by numbing out. And so we get into that dance and it just happens. It happens automatic, like we're breathing.
Right. Yes.
And so it's wild when I can step back and really take that moment to unpack that stuff and walk into it and have those talks with that, that 10-year-old or 6-year-old or 15-year-old self, because a lot of times we can be in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and that little person in us that had those core wounds, it's coming back up, and those messages are coming back up.
And
so,
it's we're not even aware of it.
yes. And so it's, I have inadequacy from being raised in my house, but that doesn't mean that I'm blaming them. They have their inadequacy from their house.
Right.
And so it's like, how do we get to this place of making it safe?
Right.
Making it, we've talked about the difference between privacy and secrecy.
Right.
And privacy really helps that place to where we can do that. A lot of people don't want to go there. I mean, we see it in our friends and stuff like that. It's like
you have to find safe spaces.
Yes, because the messages you tell yourself are crazy.
And I have friends that, even though I am a safe person, and just by virtue of being married to you as a therapist and the confidentiality and I've become kind of a vault in a lot of ways, which is nice. But I have found that even with some friends that consider me a safe person, they've had to be intentional about finding someone to share their stuff with, like a therapist or, whatever. But they've had to commit to therapy, so that they can hear what they need to, they can process what they need to process, even though I'm a safe person. I think you do have to be intentional about trying to walk through that pain box and do it for yourself. Do it for yourself.
That made me think when we were in Florida, and I said I ran into this pastor and his wife because I saw the deal and I was talking to him, and we talked for a little while getting coffee.
Yes.
And they're from Chicago. I think his name was Steve or something like that. But I go, oh yeah, we're doing a podcast, my wife and I. Oh, is she a therapist also?
Right.
But I
know people do, but
the deal is, though, you are wise. You don't have to necessarily find a therapist. But yes, I believe in therapy because I am a therapist. But sometimes you can walk through that pain box with your friends and your peers. It's like create.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying as well. That's why I was laughing.
And there have been some that I can't, even though I'm a safe person, they choose to walk through it with somebody else. But
one, I think you had
sense.
that experience when you went to onsite. You didn't know those people,
No.
but you connected, and it gave you that place because you didn't have familiarity breeds contempt.
yeah.
And so that's that place where it's hard, man. And
Right.
so I love this talk. I expound on it more. I expound on it, when I'm doing this on our core wounds, where we find other people that have some similar core wounds. I mean, we all have inadequacy and abandonment, but it's just, similar in the sense that we haven't dealt with them. And so we find partners in life that haven't dealt with those, core wounds as well. And it just kind of layers on top of each other.
Right.
And so I'm giving this talk actually at a national conference called the DFW Symposium, I think on March 25th.
Oh, yeah.
That Thursday. So I'm excited. So if, it'll be online and in person, so you can see me expound more on these core wounds. So until next time, I mean, look at that stuff. You can always contact us. Shannon, we have a new website or email. What's our email?
Well, just filteroptional@gmail.com.
Yeah.
We're just starting with that. And we have a Filter Optional Facebook page. And of course, you can find us on iTunes. And, but yeah, filteroptional@gmail.com and Filter Optional Facebook page. You can always message us through that too.
All right. So thank you. And until next time, Filter Optional out.